So tell me about what's the biggest takeaway in that Lincoln leadership?
Lincoln on Leadership.
What's one of the biggest takeaways of that book?
The very first thing that I saw, and I think it's a big part about leadership, is management by walking around. It's when you're not just talking about leadership, but you're out there with your boots on the ground. The biggest takeaway I got from that is be a visible leader. Be out there so people can see what you're about, not just hear what you're about. Because a lot of us are visual and we want to see things to believe it. And that management by walking around shows that. It's leading by example.
Hey, I'm Armando Leduc, producer, film actor, and owner of Leduc Entertainment. I've chosen a life off the beaten path and wanted to find others that are doing the same. Spaghetti on the Wall is a show based on all of the years that I've thrown spaghetti on the wall and nurtured what stuck. We will share fun stories, ideas, tips, tricks, and more. Welcome to Spaghetti on the Wall. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on when you are consuming this podcast. Spaghetti on the Wall, ladies and gentlemen, we have Michael Laidler. What's up, dude?
Not much. Just happy to be on the show and seeing what you have in store for me.
Oh, bruh. So you were in law enforcement, I hear, for 19 years.
Yes. A couple of years.
That's stressful. Is it stressful? Was it stressful? You're not doing it now, right?
No, I still do it now. I do both. I have a full-time job in law
do?
enforcement, and then I have a speaking business that talks about mental fatigue, burnout, self-awareness, leadership, nonstop.
And you probably started doing this because of the fact that you were seeing a lot of people having burnout.
I was one of the people that felt it, yes. I didn't have to just see it.
Yeah.
I experienced it.
You were experiencing it. So how did you get over it? Or how are you? It's probably an active thing. I mean, it's not something that you probably get over and you're like, yeah, okay, whatever. It's probably something that you have to continue to work on, right?
It's when it comes to when it comes to fatigue and burnout, it's an ongoing battle. You have to continuously reassess yourself. You have to continuously look at ways to improve. You have to think about, well, what can I do to get better? But it's all the time. It's not like I could tell you 3 ways how to do it right now and it's going to work and never have to work on it again. Because people that say that, I don't know where they get that from, but it's an everyday process going through it because we all deal with different stresses.
Right. So what was the epiphany behind, sort of writing the book and going, something's got to change?
It wasn't an overnight process. And I know sometimes when people see it, they're like, oh man, you figured that out quickly. It actually took me nearly 16, 17 years in the field to truly understand how to handle burnout. And there's still times when I go through it, I'm like, all right, I speak about this, I instruct about this, let me rewind back and still do some of my studies. So I think where it all started, I started in law enforcement at 19. Obviously, at 19 years old, there's not a lot of life experience we have in general, but that's where my career started. I was blessed and fortunate to kind of get into the field early. And it wasn't until a couple of years after that to where it was the longest week I ever had in law enforcement. The first time that I felt the burnout was when I went to a traffic crash. The vehicle was flipped over. I was the youngest and the smallest person at the time that out of the group of us that got there. So we decided, hey, someone needs to go in there and apply pressure to the woman's arm. And looking around, they said, hey, you're up. So I was hoisted into the passenger window. And while they were holding my legs, it was just my job to take this towel and put on the woman's arm. So in my head, and what I can still visualize is putting pressure on her arm and her having a photo of her son and just saying, me hijo. Because in her eyes, it was over. Because she was pinned in the vehicle. She had nowhere to go. And it wasn't until the fighters got there that she was able to get out. But it was something that I had to look and handle for probably 2 to 3 minutes. And, a lot of us aren't taught that, especially me being 22 years old at the time. I wasn't ready for that. And after the incident was done, obviously, we got her out. We saved her life. Her arm was completely gone, but she had her life to go to, and she can get back to her son. After the incident, there was no debrief, no after action, no, hey, do you need to go see a therapist? None of that. And I felt burnt out that day, but I still had a job to do, still had to go protect society, and we just kept it moving. 2 days later, I went to a call with unresponsive baby. That was how the call went out. As soon as myself and another officer get there, the door opens up. The family is in there frantic, and they hand me the baby. Baby maybe 3 months old. I take this baby, and I could just tell there's no life left in the baby. But everybody's expected me, the uniformed police officer, to do something to revive the baby. I don't know how long it was. I don't know if it was 5 seconds or 5 minutes, but it was the longest time in my life holding a lifeless baby in my hand. Firefighters got there, once again, coming to save the day. But even when they got there, they took the baby, and the way they responded with their verbal and their physical actions, they knew that baby was a goner. That situation, same thing as what happened 2 days earlier. The call was over. Hey, no debrief, no after action. Get back in patrol and go from there. The next day, the only way I knew how to handle it at 22 years old was probably how some of us still handle it now. There's this restaurant called Calico Jack's in Tallahassee, Florida. It's not around anymore. I checked a couple of years ago. I did all you can eat crabs and all you can drink Blue Moon. And that's how I handled it, through alcohol. Now, fortunately, nothing crazy happened, but at the time, I didn't know that was the right way to do it. And when I look at it now, nearly 20 years later, I was going through burnout. And it took me years, over a decade, to realize it. So I think that was the first time I experienced burnout to that level. And it wasn't until about a year and a half ago, when it was the summer of 21, and I've already had my speaking business. I've already had some of my friends pass away. And I was like, you know what? It just hit me like, hey, I got to do something with the speaking business. And although I was talking about leadership development, I was like, what else can I do to help improve the lifestyle of law enforcement officers? What can I do to provide strategies to help them overcome tough situations? Because we go through it. They go through it. And a lot of times there's not a lot of training for that. Now, it's gotten better over the years. I must admit there's a lot of push worldwide on officer wellness, but there's still not enough. And I think that was the turning point, was this summer of 21, me telling myself, I have to do something. And throughout last year and even up to this time of the year, I can tell the difference it's making, because it's just sometimes people have to know what the possibilities are.
Because if you don't, I mean, you can't really do the job correctly.
Correct.
Right? But not only that, like, I mean, it's just, it's super stressful just in the climate that we have now, in terms of like how people are viewing law enforcement and, just coming up on crazy stuff on a daily basis. Like, it's just, yeah, I always wonder, people that have like firefighting jobs and EMTs and police officers and first responders, what are they doing to blow off steam, and how are they doing that in a healthy way? I mean, that's why they have so many television shows and movies, around like, law enforcement, and it's always almost the same story, right? It's the guy, seen a little bit too much, experienced too much. He's, too old for this shit, and then drinks heavy and, and is, at times can be suicidal. So, I think it's definitely something that's needed. Glad you're picking up the torch and, and sort of running with it. So how are people finding you?
Right now, because during COVID and I think about a year prior to it, I kind of slowed down on my speaking business, and it's just because I had other things going on, which was involving my full-time job. I didn't have the time to spend on it. So at the end of 2021, I found this marketing company that they talked about getting speaking engagements within 90 days. And I'm always intrigued by some of these programs. And I was like, you know what? I'm ready to enhance my speaking. Obviously, the summer of 21, I said, hey, I got to do more. And then this company I saw, and I was like, you know what? There's a reason why I'm seeing them now. I reached out to them. They showed me a marketing strategy. And what I learned is outreach. So what I have been doing over the last probably 18 months is complete outreach. So most of the people that have seen me, it's through my outreach, and then speaking at conferences, going into agencies, virtual trainings, my YouTube channel, LinkedIn, how you and I met, just expanding to that, because I'm realizing that being a small business owner, not everybody just finds you quickly. It
Right.
takes time. So
Yeah, no doubt.
it's just been kind of just exposure, podcasts, different things to show people what I offer. Me just having conversations with other individuals that's my consider my peers, just telling them what I do and what my objectives are, what my passions are. So I think that's been the main way they found me. I kind of see it starting to build up now, and I know you know how it is being a small business owner, especially in the infant phases of building. It's a lot of outreach, and then you slowly start seeing people starting to come back and find you like, hey, we heard you speak here. Someone recommended you from this workshop. And I think I'm starting to feel that now, not to the point to where I want it to be, but definitely the reach coming back out to me. For example, like I have a marketing company right now, and I think that's part of how we met through some of the impressions and kind of putting myself out there through social media, which I think is much more important than what people think at times. But
Right.
it's definitely been a process that I've seen that I've had to do initially to get people to come find me.
You're standing in front of a couple of books. What are you reading back there?
So the books I have, let's see, let me pull them all out. I have John Maxwell, How Successful People Lead. I have, let me take this little note off. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I have Lincoln on Leadership, which is my favorite book.
Hadn't read that one yet.
It is an amazing book to read. I recommend it to everybody. Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey.
100%.
I think that's a staple. One of my mentors, he's a professional speaker. His book is called Rise Above Chaos, Eric Green.
Rise Above Chaos.
And then the coaching program that I'm certified in, the John Maxwell, and Everyone Communicates, Few Connect. And then, of course, my book, Greatness Beyond the Badge.
Right on. When did you finish that?
It was another challenge that once I got into that marketing program, I was listening to a podcast that was on this particular program. And they said, you know what, we can publish your book in 90 days. I don't know what is about 90 days, but my level of curiosity gets me. So when January of 2022 started, yes, we're only talking about last year, I had no intention of writing a book. I heard this podcast in March of 2022. I signed up for the program, and I have my book fully published on Amazon and in people's hands by July 26th of last year.
Wow. Very cool. That's awesome, man. Congrats. So
Thank
tell
you.
me about what's the biggest takeaway in that Lincoln leadership?
Lincoln on Leadership.
Lincoln on what's one of the biggest takeaways of that book?
The very first thing that I saw, and I think it's a big part about leadership, is management by walking around. I want to say that the acronym is MWBA. It's when you're not just talking about leadership, but you're out there with your boots on the ground. You're actually in people's area, you're actually speaking with them. You're building relationships. You're allowing yourself to grow. Now, I know with the virtual trend, it's not as easy, but that doesn't mean you can't be on virtual calls, Zoom, Skype, Riverside, anything to kind of connect that. But the biggest takeaway I got from that is be a visible leader. Be out there so people can see what you're about, not just hear what you're about. Because a lot of us are visual, and we want to see things to believe it. And that management by walking around shows that. It's leading by example.
I like that. I had got a mentor who talks about how you can create leveraged employees and the different phases. And so it talks about, the micromanagement phase. And I think micromanagement gets a bad connotation to it because people are like, I don't need to be micromanaged. It's like, well, at the very beginning you do, right? Because,
Right.
There's a set of service standards. There's a set of, the processes and procedures, but what we've done is we've included the employees within the organizing of the processes and procedures and what the KPI should be, so that when they come back and go, well, I didn't get this done, be like, well, we all had a meeting that you guys agreed that this could be the KPI, right? I'm not coming up with these numbers. You guys said, hey, it takes this long to edit a video. Hey, it takes this long to trim a video. It takes this long to do this, right? So if these are the metrics that you guys are giving me, right? We're going to write them down, and then we're going to do, what are the service standards of how we deliver, our videos and our marketing service and all that. We've got to micromanage someone through that process so that they can, absorb it, and then they can become leveraged employees where they can start teaching other people how we do this particular thing. So I do like that idea of, being hands-on, and visible, especially in those stages when you're trying to get someone to adopt a way of doing things that is in line with, the vision, mission, and core values of the business, so it's super important. What's one of the biggest takeaways of your book?
I think, well, I know because I wrote the book, is starting off with defining who you are, understanding that you have to have goals, you're going to have failures, how to respond to them, you're going to have wake-up calls, and realizing that that's part of who you are, not just who someone else wants you to be. And I tell people when they look at the title, they say, well, greatness beyond the badge, that's just for law enforcement. I always say no. That's just because my background's in law enforcement, so that's the most relatable industry to me. But I've given this presentation, and people that outside of this industry has read the book, and once they actually dive deep into it, what they realize is that the badge is just a symbol of whatever uniform, whatever shirt and tie, whatever organization that you're working for. You can be great beyond whatever your title is. But it starts off with understanding who you are first, because you can't be the best employee. You can't leverage employees unless you know who you are. You can't build up your staff if you just think that the company is the most important thing, because you are the most important thing to yourself, then your family, then the organization. And throughout the book, that's what I build. I build on defining who you are, understanding why you should develop who you are. And for all the sports fans, I use the Kobe Bryant Mamba mentality concept, being the best version of yourself and how to get there.
So how do you get there?
Time management.
Do you have like an outline?
Yeah.
Time management.
Yeah. One of the biggest things, and it's the very last chapter in my book, it's called the 24-hour formula, and it's planning your day out. But in that plan, you put at least, I know people look at me crazy, I say 10% of that day is growing yourself. But you have to be serious about it. You have to be dedicated to it, because before we know it, the day's over and all we want to do is go to sleep and watch Netflix. And then we spent the whole day not growing ourselves. And we're like, hey, tomorrow we can do it. No, plan it out. Say, hey, I'm going to spend an hour reading a self-help book. I'm going to spend an hour studying this law. I'm going to spend an hour just building up my brain, because over time, and I want to say, most people say after 5 years, you become an expert in anything you're trying to grow. Well, in 5 years, spending 10% a day on yourself, you become an expert on who you are. And sometimes it's hard for people to understand that because they don't spend as much time doing it. So the very last chapter in the book talks about planning out your growth, planning out your self-awareness. And I believe that when it comes to that part of being the best version of yourself, it's about planning to be the greatest, because you owe it to yourself. Without planning for it, you won't get there. So you have to have some kind of plan in place to hit whatever goal you have, because without it, you're just kind of swinging at the air. And then you find yourself not planning at all. So having a plan to be the best, to be on that path to greatness, has to be there for it to happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. You a family guy?
Yes. Yes.
So how do you balance that, just that work-life balance?
Plan it. So even my 24-hour formula, I have times in there that they're not always as strict. Like, I can't say between 3 and 4 that I'm going to talk to my son or have dinner with my mom. I can't just say that, but I make sure that I have an hour block somewhere in there, a 2-hour block somewhere in there where I'm connecting with them, like true dedication to them. Now, it's up to you, depends on your lifestyle. Obviously, you got to sleep, you got to eat. Most of us have to work. You have to grow yourself. You have to throw in exercise. You have to do a number of things. But when it comes to that work home balance, you have to have that built in there as well. There's only 24 hours. It's tight, but the more you pay attention to your lifestyle, the more you look at how other people are doing it, it takes a conscious decision. If you could spend an hour going through social media, just playing on your phone, well, can you switch that hour to your family? Can you actually figure out what you're doing? Can you sit at that table with them longer? Hey, tell me about your day. What's on your mind? What's on, just little things that you may not think about, but that's where my work-life balance comes at. I always have a dedicated time, or at least a dedicated amount of time to be spent with my family each day.
I love that. So what would you say is your brand? Like, are you trying, because you're trying to grow yourself as a public speaker and an author, correct?
Yes.
So is it more motivation? Is it more leadership? Is it mindset? Like, when people hire you, what are they expecting to get out of your talk?
A growth mindset. One of the things I realize that a lot of us go through, at least when it comes to the individual, is mental fatigue. We just get tired, and when we're tired, we don't do nothing else. We just quit altogether, and we find ourselves just sleeping on the couch, like I don't want to do anything. So whoever brings me in, typically, it's like, okay, what steps to self-awareness can we take to help minimize mental fatigue? Because it's going to happen. Stress happens no matter what. You never know. You may be walking through your house and a pipe might burst. That's stressful. You didn't plan it, but how you react to it is what makes a difference. And my goal is to help build mindsets knowing that things can happen. You're not going to be stressed out saying, oh, I can't wait for the pipe to burst for me to see what's going to happen. But I definitely want you to know, like, okay, if it does happen, I'm mentally ready for it. Now, when it comes to the corporations, I look at things like retention and how do you build leadership programs? How do you build self-awareness programs to keep your people there? Because when you don't have enough staff, that's also something that adds to mental fatigue, because people are overworked. They're working 2 and 3 shifts in a row. They're not getting work done, and that all builds. So whenever someone brings me, I'm like, okay, we're going to work on mental fatigue with the individuals. And then as a company, we're going to try to look at how do we retain the people we already have.
How do you work on mental fatigue?
Just going back to knowing who you are.
Time management? Gotcha.
Yeah, no, actually, even before time management, knowing who you are. What are your goals? What are your failures? Because we all failed. So it's good to recognize it, because we just can't run away from it. And sometimes when we don't know and understand failures, that's how we have things like suicide. Because some people can't handle how hard things are, because they're just not ready for it. And I remember back in March of 2019, I was sitting at my desk working on some paperwork, and I got a call saying that Ben Valle's dead. Now, I know you guys don't know who that is, but he was a close friend. I just spoke to him the month before. They were like, hey, he's dead. I'm like, nah, you guys are playing around. I just talked to him, because they didn't really know how he died. So I called somebody else. I was like, hey, what happened to him? They was like, no, he's dead. He committed suicide. What I took from that personally, and I sat there for at least 10 to 15 minutes at the time, just like, wow, this guy was happy. He never complained about anything. On the surface, everything was great. Then I thought, well, what happened in his life that was so bad that he couldn't recover from? What failure did he go through that he was like, this is too much for me? So when I look at mental fatigue, there was mental fatigue in there. There was something in his mind that just got too tired and said, I don't want to go anymore. So I'm like, what can we do to start that process, recognizing who you are? And that's why I've built a lot of the book and my brand on how to increase self-awareness, because I believe that impacts mental fatigue, burnout, stress, just knowing that it's going to happen, but how do you respond to it before it happens? Now, the other side to that is people talk about resiliency. How do you respond after it? I want to know how to handle it before it. I want to be preparing versus reacting, because I know in law enforcement industry, it's hard for someone to tell us we're wrong. So you say, hey, you had a bad incident. Let's go talk about it. No, I don't want to talk about it now. Months happen. Alcohol happens. Other illegal things happen. Next thing you know, you're in trouble. Well, my goal is to get ahead of the game to law enforcement, first responders, anybody that deals with stress, which is all of us, and say, hey, let's start off with defining who we are and start building ourselves up from there by focusing on what we do each day.
Are you doing coaching and consulting as well, or no?
Yes, I do executive coaching, not as much. Once again, my industry can be tough at times with that, but I have had private companies come in and say, hey, once we build this program, can you do some executive coaching? I've not done as much as I would like, but I know I do have it open. I've been trained in the process. Fortunately, John Maxwell has a whole certification that talks about coaching. So I do coach just case by case, depending on what the company or organization, what they're looking for.
So you're still in law enforcement?
Correct. Yes. I do that full time, and I build my business. I guess be an entrepreneur full time as well.
So you're a police officer?
No, I actually work in corrections.
Oh, what's that?
One of the other sides. Yes. the other sides of the house. Yeah. So I don't usually I try to separate the parts because I know that's kind of my stressful side, and that's why I tell people. People are like, well, how do you know how it is? Because I still see it. I still hear violent things happening. And when you hear it, how do you respond to it? Well, part of what helps me out now is the self-awareness side, having speaking business, having podcasts like this with you, expressing it, letting people know it's okay to fail. It's okay not to know, but let's put a plan in place. Let's figure out how to handle this mental fatigue. Let's learn how to handle this burnout. Let's just figure out how to make things better because you're going to deal with it no matter what. But yes, I do balance both.
Did you always do corrections?
No. So I did corrections for about 10 years, but I was a police officer first. I did that in Tallahassee. I did that for about 4 years. That's where those 2 incidents happened with the traffic crash and a baby. And then I did Border Patrol for about 4 years down in Laredo, Texas, which was very entertaining, to say the least. And then, and then I've done corrections as well.
Where do you think the corrections industry is headed, I guess, in the next 5 to 10 years?
If we look at personnel, I mean, unfortunately, people are going to commit crimes no matter what. So it's not like that's going to shrink. There's a lot of laws that benefit people that commit crimes. And obviously we're trying to work on their mindset, their growth mindset to help build them up so they go back to society. But even so, people just do bad things. It's just where we're at in life. It's unfortunate, but it's true. It's realistic. Some people just have that mindset that they're going to do wrong, but our goal is to get them back out. But I think that with corrections, it's going to be there. Now, staffing, and I think staffing nationwide is low. A lot of people want to be in law enforcement. We see what goes on TV. It's usually, we usually don't make the national news for doing something good. It's usually making the national news for doing something bad. Sometimes I wish the webcams showed us saving people's lives. And we blew that up and we created movements just for that. But that's not what the news does. That's not what gets people all like going. So the corrections industry, I think it's going to, I think the staffing's not getting any better anytime soon. But I think it's going to be the same overall when it comes to this mission, because obviously they have people that commit crimes have to go somewhere. Someone has to keep them. They're not going to watch themselves. So
sure.
And somebody has to be part of it. Go ahead.
How do you recruit people to do this, to want to become, corrections officers?
Traditionally, and what I've been seeing lately, is offer more money, offer incentives. Government work, whether it's federal, state, there's usually great benefits behind it. There's obviously job security. 9 times out of 10, as long as you show up and do what you're required to do, you can maintain that for 25 to 30 years. Because it ain't closing down. It's not like, hey, we're going to close down the prison tomorrow. You know what I mean? There's no layoff. So how does that, like we see in other industries.
Is it because I know some are private prisons and then some are funded by, the government.
Correct.
I don't see how it's a good thing to privatize prisons. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I haven't dealt a lot with privatization. There's a lot of people out there. That's all. I know that for sure. There's a lot of people that need to be confined somewhere, and the private prisons usually offer the same size facilities, but they take in more. I don't know where they put the people that commit the crimes and the private facilities, but I know they're a little bit more inexpensive than if they just go to a regular state or federal prison like that. So I know you're right. I know they have closed down some. I know they're closing down. So I just see overpopulations in other areas, but I don't know how that's going to work in the long run. That's one of the things that I believe we're testing out as a whole industry, as a country to see, but I can see them coming back just because of the numbers.
Because there are not enough people. I guess there's not enough place for the people to go in.
Correct.
But here's the thing: aren't there people? And this is obviously probably going to be a more philosophical debate, or just questions in general. But where are we drawing the lines in terms of what's deserved, what's not deserved, compared to different things? I mean, it's all based on the judge, right? Like the judge is sentencing everyone.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So, you go through your trial or your case and you plea or you get found guilty during trial. And then at that point, the judge has a certain set of guidelines that's given in case law and procedural law, congressional law, whatever law you want to call it. And that's how that judge makes their decision. So I'm with you. I know laws have changed for decades and they will continue to change. So it's just a number of, we've seen it now. I think I was listening to I was listening to your podcast earlier, the one where you had the guys from New Braunfels. They're talking about CBD and stuff like that. I mean, you talk about that same industry 10 to 15 years ago, and you got people in jail. Now, 10 to 15 years later, give or take, now it's a lucrative industry. So things change, times change. I mean, we had the crack laws in the 90s. So, it's all about what's going on. We have issues with fentanyl now nationwide. So I can only imagine how those laws are going to impact like people that commit the crimes and sell it and distribute it. But it varies. I don't. That's why I say I don't think that the numbers will ever lower, because right when you think you've had one way that should be working, something else comes up.
Mm-hmm. What are the things that are going on in prisons to help rehabilitate, people to get back out and be, functional members of society?
I know one of the foundational things that I have seen is and I don't know the percentage of the number exactly, but there are people that come into prison, jails with no education. So one of the first things that a lot of prisons and jails are trying to do is at least get these individuals their GEDs. Something to where they can at least have some kind of education going back out. And then there's other programs like rehabilitation programs for people that have drug offenses. There's programs for helping people get CDLs. So there's a number of things that people can take if they choose to. It's just what they're willing to do before they get out. So there are programs out there. I've seen a lot of different ones. I've seen them grow over the years. Like one of the things, like I was just mentioned, CDL. I didn't know that was something that was going to be offered. And lately I've been seeing that rise in the last couple of years and being pushed, because you want people to have some kind of work when they get out. Because usually people that are busy doing legitimate jobs, they usually stay out of trouble. So we want them not to be in trouble, and we don't want to be putting people. Nobody just says, "Hey, I want to put this person in jail." That's not what law enforcement wants. At least as a whole. Now there are a few people that stray away, of course. That's every company. That's every industry.
Sure.
But as a whole, you're like, "Hey, I don't want this person to be in jail." So there are programs out there like that. There's canine programs where the dogs, or not the dogs, but the people that commit crimes, they take care of the dogs. They raise them up for a couple of years, and that's part of their rehabilitation. There's a situation where you show people how to cook, culinary arts. So it's amazing how many programs are available to wherever you're located at.
That's cool. That's good to know. So you are, when do you retire? Are you going to retire soon?
It
Get
depends
out
if
of
this
the-
business blows up. I love what I do, and I do a lot of training already, and I think that I would have to see a push in my business to say, hey, you can leave this one area for this. And I think that's most people that go from full-time to a full-time business, because there's a lot of things that can and cannot happen in a small business. And if you're not ready for that, which I'm not, then you can't go into a full-time. So
Sure.
if I stay in my current industry, I have nearly a decade to go to get full retirement, to get a pension, as some people say.
Gotcha.
But I do know that if certain things are built up to a certain level, I have certain numbers in my head right now. I'm like, hey, if I achieve this, once again, goal setting, I can see switching and going full time into speaking, because I've loved being able to go around the country last year talking about self-awareness and leadership. It's just amazing for people to actually come to you after your presentations and say, hey, I never thought about that. Thank you for speaking. Or, man, you really changed my mind today. I mean, I've had guys in their 60s that's been in law enforcement longer than I've been alive. And it was like, Michael, I've never thought about what I would be outside of this industry. Thank you for that presentation. So it's been an amazing journey in speaking. I mean, I was speaking in Dubai a couple of weeks ago, speaking at a police summit. So I don't know when or if I will leave, but it's definitely possible given some of the opportunities like this that I've been having.
That's awesome, man. Well, Michael, go ahead and let people know where they can find you and where they can book you.
Well, I will say where me and you met, which is on LinkedIn. I think that's one of the best professional platforms out there right now. And I think that the way it's growing, it's going to stay that way. So if you just go to LinkedIn, write Michael Laidler, you're going to find me on there. Trust me, I think I'm the only Michael Laidler on there. I know I've checked Google before. There's a couple of European guys that have my name, but on LinkedIn, I've pretty much circled that market. Same thing with Instagram, it's Michael Laidler. Same thing with YouTube, it's Michael Laidler. You can find me on all those areas. Now, my website has one variation to it. It's michaelalaidler.com. That's the only thing. I couldn't find Michael Laidler, so I had to put an A, which is my middle initial, in between my first and last name. So that was the way that went.
What's your middle name?
Alexander.
Cool.
Yeah, I didn't want to put the whole Alexander on there. It was already too many. It was already 14 letters without the A. I added the A. That made it 15. I was like, if I had Alexander, it's going to be like a whole paragraph. So I was like, let me put.
It's a whole book.
Yeah, it's a whole book. And then obviously my email, which is pretty simple. It's michael@michaelalaidler.com. So any of those platforms, you can reach me. Obviously, once again, LinkedIn is my favorite. And I think that what I've seen on LinkedIn is going to continue to grow. So if you're on there, hit me up. Instagram, hit me up. YouTube, like some videos and subscribe. And if not, my email.
That's awesome. And your book again?
It's called Greatness Beyond the Badge.
Greatness Beyond the Badge, and you can find it on?
It's on Amazon.
Cool. That's awesome, man. Michael, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. It's been a pleasure. That's Spaghetti on the Wall, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, brought to you by Leduc Entertainment. For all of your digital marketing needs, social media videos, whatever you need, we got you. And you can always watch Spaghetti on the Wall on YouTube. Catch it on Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere where you can find a podcast. And we'll see y'all next week.